Welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Machine Learning. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Burke, and I do data engineering and machine learning at Databricks. And I'm joined by my amazing co-host,
Ben Wilson. I write LinkedIn posts about open source releases at Databricks.
So, Ben, if people want to contact you, should they do it through LinkedIn, and what should they say?
Funny, what we were talking about before the recording. Yeah, I'm a friendly guy. Reach out. I do respond. If you're trying to offer me a position in another company, I probably won't respond to you. But if you just want to talk, ask some questions, I always respond.
Cool. So you, audience, have just been directly lied to. But if you ask the right questions and have it be funny, he might respond. We'll see.
Yeah, it's all about time. Like, if it's something that's clever, then I'll make time immediately to respond. Or if it's something about something that I work on that's actually fundamentally broken, I will respond immediately and try to fix it. But if it's just general chit chat and it doesn't spark joy and does not give me a grin, I might wait a couple of weeks to respond.
Heard. Cool. So today's topic is something that I have been seeing a lot in the field. And I think if you work at a company, you probably have seen this sort of antics and line of questioning as well. So there's this thing called Gen AI. It apparently is super cool. It does your job. It takes your job. And it also talks and processes image and all of these amazing feats of sci-fi. And so what we're going to talk about today is you're the CEO of a company. You heard about this magical thing called Gen AI, and you want to see how you can integrate it within your business. And specifically, how do you scale this decision-making process so that you actually have usable production-ready features that are not not a nightmare to build and maintain. And you also want to do this in a finite spike-based research process so that your employees are not just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and tons of time in prototyping and exploration. So Ben, you're CEO of a hot dog stand. You have a bunch of hot dogs. And you have franchise throughout the New York City area. And you have a machine learning team to predict demand. You have a product team to handle branding. You have hot dog suppliers and all this amazing infrastructure. And you want to use Gen AI. For hot dogs?
Cool.
How would you go about starting to answer this question and specifically delegating key components of decision making to your leadership?
I mean, I would always start off. I mean, if I was CEO of this company, I would probably talk to the leaders in tech and in the business side to strategize about, does this make sense for our business? And if I was CEO, I probably wouldn't know that much about the technical details. So I would defer to somebody who does know, make sure they're in the room, and give them full leeway to tell me if I'm being an idiot or not. And start the conversation and be like, hey, explain this thing to me. What does it do? What doesn't it do? What are its capabilities? And how does this impact our business? Go think about this, research it, and come up with a plan for me about what are some options we could do. And I would wait for their responses and then discuss it with them. But I'm not in that role. I don't ever think I will be in that role. I'm more on the nerd side. So it would be more of getting assigned a task like that. Say like, hey, go build something with Gen AI. And that process would be on the receiving end of that previous statement of what could we build and does it make sense?
So let's call you CTO then. CEO
Sure.
says, hey, let's use Gen AI. I want to be advanced and cutting edge. What do you do?
I go talk to whoever the people are that know most about that So even as a CTO, you're not cronking out code all the time. You might, our CTO does, but you go and build a working group to go and discuss this. Say, like, what are our options from a technical perspective of what theoretically could be done, and make sure that everybody's on the same page with understanding what the limitations are, and do some scenarios, like some working group scenarios of, like, okay, we're gonna, like, theoretically we're gonna try to tackle this project within, like, this type of scope. What would we need to build, and what are our unknowns? Like, do we know how to do, like, out of these 37 things that we need to do this hypothetical project, how many of these have we done before, and how long did it take to do these? So we need to figure out, like, deployment. Where would this thing run? Whether we're deploying our own custom model, that would probably be a large infrastructure discussion, and you would need a lot of people in the room to comment on the technical feasibility of doing that.
Well,
Or is
I
this
think that we skipped an important step, like finding the business need and sort of understanding what Gen AI actually is. So let's assume that our company, it's a hot dog stand. We don't have that much technical capability. We like know what Gen AI is. How would you go about researching the different applications, the different use cases, and how it could actually benefit our business?
so that would be within the technical discussion, but I would always, for something that's new, you always discuss that in tech first. You don't involve the business first, because the danger of that is you get some really fantastic ideas that the business comes up with, of, like, hey, we could solve these problems that are really hard for us to solve right now. But if you don't know what the capabilities are of what you're going to be doing, or how you would build it, or how you would actually deploy this thing, and what does the maintenance life cycle look like? What are the performance considerations? Like, what are the SLAs for this thing? What is the availability that we need to have? Is it capable of doing this? So having the technical understanding first in sort of a simulated environment to discuss this stuff, that prepares you for that next phase of, okay, now let's go meet with business and see what problems they want us to solve. And we can tell them uniformly as a group what we think is possible and what isn't possible.
That's super fascinating. I've actually legitimately never heard that before, and it makes a lot of sense. So, starting with a deep understanding of what building, maintaining, and using that tech would look like, and then you come with that knowledge into a business meeting and say, hey, what problems do you guys have? Can we apply this tech to
Right.
those problems?
Yeah, because otherwise you're going to be holding the bag as a tech organization of, like, hey, the business wants to do this, CEO, board of directors, whatever, they say we got to build this Gen AI thing. And then the tech team is like, okay, you assign this to us. And then they spend weeks, like, trying to learn this thing. Like, what could we use here? Like, it's a cool problem that we should really solve. But you're preloading the tech team with the assumption that they need to build this thing and get it working at all costs, and they'll do that. But if you don't know whether it's possible or not going forward, or what the possibilities are of the tech, you're now potentially setting yourself up for massive amounts of scope creep, or just blazing forward in solving a real business problem with so many unknowns that your initial, best effort guess at the complexity of, like, oh, this will probably take us like 4 months to build. We're going to hire some consultants to help out for, like, staff augmentation to get this going. And then you find out at month 3 that, like, whoa, we didn't know that all of this was going to turn out like this. We didn't know that it couldn't do X, Y, and Z. We didn't know that we needed to build A, B, and C. We had no clue that, like, this is how much the system is going to cost to run. And when you're at that point, you now have to make a really difficult conversation with, C-level folks. Like, you have to tell the CEO, like, yeah, we just burned 3 months of our dev team's time into solving this problem, and now we realize that it's going to take another 5 months, and maybe we have to ingest or purchase additional data to make this work. We have to build all these ETL pipelines. We need to figure out how to deploy our solution in a more scalable manner. We've never done that before for this type of thing. So everything just becomes like a research project, and your deadlines, you just blow through your deadlines. You never have a product that makes it. And at some point, the executive staff is going to say, why have we spent all this money and we don't see anything? You told us that this was going to take 4 months. We're at month 7. Like, why are you all so incompetent? And the tech team's like, we didn't know that it was this hard, or we didn't know what we didn't know at the time. So if the tech team is allowed to at least evaluate what it is that they could be building, so that they know, yeah, we can build this. And here's a bunch of stuff that we know is just not possible to do. Going into that business meeting for that ideation session of what could we do, you can head that off the pass and focus on, let's just talk about the stuff that we know, like we've done some research. We know that this is possible. It's proven.
As you were talking, I was thinking that there would be a ton of scope creep when seeing the art of the possible from just a tech perspective. So if you're not looking to solve a specific problem, you can say, oh, we can try this, or we can do this, or we can serve it on our grandma's basement, or we can have it write all of our code and see what happens there. But as I was thinking through that, I think as long as you understand the atomic components of the technology and the basics of, as you said, how do you serve, how do you query, how do you interact with, how do you build with, a lot of those fundamentals can then anchor these decisions. Do you agree, or do you think that lacking a set of initial business problems would lead to too much ambiguity for a useful exercise?
You have to think about who's in the room during that discussion. So it's not a data science team or an ML team or AI, whatever you want to call it. It's not just a bunch of ICs that are sitting around a table, brainstorming and think about all the art of possibility that's out there. You have a tech lead, you have a manager, a director, and the CTO that's in that room. That CTO is not interested in, well, what's the tech stack that we should use for actual serving this thing? Should we use like Kubernetes on like managed AWS, or should we use like Fargate for V? That CTO is going to tell that person very politely or very not politely, please stop talking. We're not here to design. We're here to talk about what is the bigger picture of, do we know how to do X? Do we know how to take some code that's written in some language and deploy it in such a way that I can send JSON to it, and if I get burst traffic, it can horizontally scale? Or if I need to deploy a more complex version, like an agent that needs to call, Python tools, where are those Python tools executing? Have we done something like that before? Do we know, are we going to use like AWS Lambda to do that execution? Are we going to use what Ben and Michael just released yesterday, Unity Catalog, to do Python function tooling execution? You need to like understand that tech. And if you're just going through a list of what is the application development lifecycle and then the deployment lifecycle, and say like, do we know how to do this? Have we done it before? Has somebody else done it before? Is there tech out there that we can use that makes this easy? And what do we do when this goes wrong? How do we redeploy? How do we change the characteristics of this? What's the dev loop for building one of these things? How do we do monitoring? Like, there's a lot of questions that come up with that sort of analysis. But what you're really trying to figure out is, do we know how to do this? And are we comfortable of providing general scoping of this problem? And it's not if you have a no there, then we can't do this project. It's more like, okay, out of these 37 steps, we have 90% that we're golden on. We know we've done all of this stuff before. It's trivial. But hey, maybe there's a couple things in here that we don't know how that works. So right after that meeting, you assign people sprint tasks. Be like, hey, go build a demo. Like, just try this out. For us, we call them customer user journeys. Like, hey, go and try to build this thing. Other places you might call it a hackathon. Like, just go and try to build this. You're not writing tests. You're not making sure that you can actually deploy it. you're doing it in like staging environments or dev, and you're just trying to see if you can make it work. And in the process of that, you might be like, yeah, I didn't make it work, but I know what I need to do to make it work. So it's a discovery process, which gives you like information about what that scoping will be. Like, well, I couldn't figure out how to get this like proxy to work right, but I know how to do that. It just takes a week to do. So, okay, that's 1 person week to do that part. The rest of it, okay, it's 4 person weeks to do all the rest of these components for this one task. That's your scope.
Cool. As CEO of said hot dog company, I am very worried about my team sinking too much time into this. How should I think about the Pareto frontier of knowledge gathering and the amount of like completeness of the information versus amount of time and money spent gathering that information?
If you're the CEO and you're worrying about that, you should not be the CEO. You should have your CTO be in charge of that. Your CTO should not be worrying about that either. They should have hired people that are now in positions of management that are making sure that their teams are time boxing all of their stuff. Like there's deadlines associated with I'm going to give you a day to figure this out. And that professional engineer knows that like, I know what I need to do here in order to get the scope. And they should know what to do to like learn that really quickly.
All right, let
And
me
document
escalate
it.
this a bit. Let's say that we have a bunch of, I, as CEO, started this company a while back and I hired a bunch of idiots. They have no idea how to write software. They are generally incompetent and don't know anything about Gen AI, serving models, none of it. So we don't know what we don't know. How do you operate? And you just joined the company, you're a pro, you know everything. How do you operate in a space where you don't know what you don't know? Like, how would you guide that team?
I would, if I just got hired in and
Sure.
everybody was so risk averse to learning anything new, my first task would be, how do I actually replace the staff here?
But like, I guess what the motivation for this question is a lot of times I work with relatively non-technical teams. They've been handed this addendum of you're supposed to use Gen AI to solve a bunch of problems. Great. They don't know everything. And they also, more importantly, don't know what they don't know. So in that scenario, let's say you're a software engineer, you've been incorrectly managed and given this task. How do you navigate in a space where you don't know what you don't know? How do you do that efficiently?
You do research spikes yourself in order to provide the evidence to go back up the chain to say, we should shift gears or downscope this and release something that is doable, but
Got
you
it.
have to provide the evidence for that. So if you're good and you've done this before and you know how all this stuff is supposed to work and everybody around you just doesn't know, or they're really eager to, yeah, let's dive in, let's go as deep as we can and try to build this. And they end up building like super complex, unmaintainable abominations. You can be the person who's like, yeah, that's cool. Like that's our end state goal. But let's approach this from a position of, let's just build the minimum required features at first. Like let's build something simple and see how this works. And we can all learn from this together. And then when we're ready to increment to the next layer of complexity. So if we're talking about Gen AI, maybe the first thing you do is just a very simple RAG. Like, hey, we need additional context for question answering based on our business data. Go build that agent. Like, okay, we're gonna, encode all of these vectors from text and store it in a vector, search database, and then we'll connect it to an LLM and we'll see how that works. We'll evaluate it. We'll do testing with the business, say like, is this good? Does this answer questions about our business? Then let's deploy it and see how it performs. Are we going to see stuff in staging on our own testing that we're like, ooh, yeah, we need to fix that, or that's kind of broken. And then when you release it to production, you start slowly ramping up users and see how people are using it, analyze their patterns, and say, are they asking questions that align to what that end goal that everybody wanted to build at first is, or are they asking things that are completely different? Do we need to adjust what our end goal is? So if you do incremental complexity increases over time, your team is learning how to do that. You're taking on way less risk because you're just pushing something out that's somewhat like a little bit simpler than that big project that you wanted to do. But you're also able to analyze user behavior. Say like, do people have the right impression of what the capabilities of this are? And are they using it as we intended? If not, then let's go talk to them and say, what do you actually want to use this for? And then collect your user feedback and adjust your roadmap accordingly to try to solve that problem if it's possible. And if not, and this project going nowhere, then pop smoke and get out. Like go do something else or build something limited in scope that's just for this one thing.
Got it. So it sounds like you just have to learn it. There's no shortcuts. Like if you need,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
But the
Yeah,
only way to learn these like processes of how to build something at minimal risk, the only people I've ever met, myself included, who have learned this lesson, usually learn it the hard way. And if you're like a team that's a startup straight out of college, say like you're all like buddies in a PhD program, you go and build something, you're gonna make mistakes. And you're gonna make these exact mistakes. You're gonna go and build something because you think everybody wants it. The number one goal that you should have in a team like that, where you're young, ambitious, and just want to build, is get an advisor who's made those mistakes before. Somebody who has experience and can be like, listen, I made this massive mistake 7 times before. Here's how I learned from it. And I worked with other people who also made mistakes and I learned from them. And this is why we have this formulaic process of going forward, of not just trying to invent the end goal state of something that's super complex, because you don't know if people want that or if it's even worthwhile to build that. You could change directions midway through. You could find out that, yeah, this is a total waste of time. Let's cut our losses. We learned a lot, so there's a benefit there. But should we pursue this to the end state because somebody told us to do it? No, because what's going to happen is you release it and it's not really what people want. People are going to, they might not tell you to your face. Even the C-suite might not say that. But those conversations will happen about like, nobody's using this. Why did your team build this? Why is this such garbage? Turn it off. But then you've sunk a year of your life into this project that nobody cares about.
got it. Okay. Another question. If you were given this scenario, you read a blog, you heard about Gen AI, it's super cool, and you want to use Gen AI, what do you think are the best applications currently as of December 20th, 2024?
The best bets right now that are proven that I've seen running in production, I've used like agentic RAG with a couple of tools that are doing deterministic execution. So you define a function that does this one, like this purposeful thing, and you're instructing the LLM, like, if you need to do this task, then this is the function you're going to use. This stuff works. It's been proven out and it's awesome. There's some of the more sci-fi stuff that isn't quite mature yet, but it will be 6 months from now. Is stuff like I ask a very obscure question to something, to an agent. This agent calls another agent to go and do some task. And then there's another agent that's reviewing that result and comparing it with the initial question, another agent that's going and fetching some data, and then another agent that's doing something with that data. And then, you know, it's kind of like the agentic frameworks that you can have the multi-agent architecture in, but having that so that it's not so complex to build and can actually like I just think the tooling isn't quite there yet. Like we're all working on this stuff right now to make it easier. Can you go and build all of like a very sophisticated, extremely complex agent yourself right now? Yeah, you can. how much code is that? Like, it's a lot.
Yeah.
This stuff gets super complicated. So
Yeah.
until tooling comes up to the point where it's like, yeah, you can kind of do this and it's not such a burden on the user. Because the difference between Gen AI stuff and traditional ML or deep learning is we know that process. We know we're not going to be retraining and redoing feature engineering once a week on a model that we deployed. We could be retraining and on new data, but we're not going to be selecting a new like library to do optimizations. We're not going to be like, oh, well, this week, like we were using scikit-learn last week. This week, let's just switch that to XGBoost and we'll deploy that. Nobody does that. I mean, if people do that, my condolences. Uh, good luck in your endeavors. I wish you all the best. And I hope that one day you learn from your errors. Um, so it's a slower process. And you're not going to be like, hey, yeah, the model's doing okay today, but hey, let's deploy a new version tomorrow that has like 40 extra features in it. We can do that, right? Can you? Yeah. How well is that model going to perform? Don't know. I wouldn't try it. I would do a dev loop of like, I need to validate this and I need to test it and I need to do A/B testing and I need to see how this performs against the existing one. It's weeks of work to do all that.
Right.
For the super complex stuff, that could be an entire quarter of work to like release a new architecture of a solution that's already in production. With Gen AI, you could make that code change and redeploy in an hour. So it's very fast and lots of things can go wrong, like very quickly.
Right.
And making changes in a complex code base that doesn't have good tooling built yet, because it's still kind of in development in industry in general, it becomes a big maintenance burden.
Yeah.
What happens if we have to rewrite our system prompt for each agent? How many places in the code do we have to do that? And do we need to customize that? Is it a sentence that we have to add, or is it an entire page of text that we have to add and then validate? So that becomes a lot of work that you have to do this.
Heard. Cool. So we were going to keep this episode short and sweet, but before I summarize, one other thing is that I've been feeling very strongly, and I'm curious, Ben, your take, and like super fast. The buy versus build. I think, and also the wait versus build it now. I think we're still in the infancy of a lot of these agentic logic based frameworks. And if you don't need it now, don't spend money on it until there's a good managed solution. There's like 70 startups all working on it. There's going to be convergence in the next year of something that's pretty good for logic based, LLM based things. What are your thoughts on just waiting?
I'd say build simple stuff that can solve an exact business need so that you gain experience and understanding of how this stuff works. I would not recommend going to GitHub and seeing a library that was released last week that seems like in its README, it's going to do all the things that you want it to do, and then go all in on that and be like, we're going to learn this library and we're going to build the craziest thing that's going to be amazing. Yeah, do that in a hackathon. Learn it. It's cool. Like, but I wouldn't push something like that to prod without thorough evaluation and analysis of it. And who knows if that library is going to be maintained a month from now. You don't know whoever's maintaining it right now. Are they working for a startup that's going to get bought by somebody and that repo is going away, or it's going to be abandoned because it's now going to be rolled into some cloud provider service? You just don't know. So I'd be careful about building super complex stuff for purposes of production deployment. But
Agreed.
for purposes of the team doing hackathons, the team learning this tech, go nuts. Like, learn it, play with it, break it, fix it. It's going to benefit everybody who's doing it. Because whether the Luddites believe it or not, this stuff is here to stay. It's not going away. It's not a hype. It's not like, oh, people are just like getting excited about this, but it's actually garbage. No. People are deploying stuff. I've seen line graph deployments at for customers, in both open source and Databricks customers, that you look at what they're doing, and you're like, yeah, that's legit. And yeah, it's complicated, like some of the stuff I've seen, but it actually works because they have a team of like 30 people working on it, and they're serious about it, and they did their homework, and they proved that it would work, and they're building like a production version of it.
Yep.
I don't think LangGraph is going anywhere.
Agreed. Cool. So the shortest episode in the history of Adventures of Machine Learning, but I'll quickly summarize. So if you're given this prompt of use Gen AI in the business and you're a technical person, start with the tech. Figure out what it will take to build, maintain, and use this technology. And then from there, you can go into business-focused conversations with an anchor in reality. A great way to figure out what it would be like to build, use, and maintain. Create CUJs or customer user journeys to identify what are the typical user behaviors and try to hack solutions. See if they're scalable, see if they're cheap, see if they're easy to build and maintain. If you haven't done this before, you got to learn it. There's just no way around it. So just do research, read books, look at articles, that type of thing. And then finally, with the current state of Gen AI, we're reaching production stability for really sci-fi use cases, but right now, some of it is not as robust as it maybe could be and should be. So just wait a little bit for those more logic-based, agentic-based systems. But RAG, I agree with Ben, is very proven and is super, super high ROI. If you're going to do anything with Gen AI, focus on RAG. Anything else?
No.
Cool. Well, until next time, it's been Michael Burke and my co-host,
Ben Wilson.
and have a good day, everyone.
We'll catch you next time.